Yep.
Hey team, welcome back to another exciting episode of the Intentional Agribusiness Leader podcast. This is your host, Mark Jewell. And today I've got a really unique take on this season where we're focusing on CEOs across the ag industry. Normally you see me interview one person. Today's a little bit interesting because not only do I have one, I have two, I have three CEOs. Not only, and this is an interesting thing to get into. So I'm just going to introduce these guys. I've got John Finegan, who's the founder and the original CEO of Beck Ag. I have Stephanie Liska, who is the former CEO of Beck Ag and the current president of Kincannon Reed. Congrats on the new role there, Stephanie. And I have Richard Bettison, who's the current CEO of Beck Ag. So I don't know if this has ever been done in the ag industry to have three current and or former CEOs from one company, and I'll say a historic and a highly influential company across the ag industry. Congratulations to all of you guys on the work over your duration with this company. It's really incredible what you guys have accomplished there. So welcome, John, Stephanie, Richard. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Mark.
Okay, I'm going to launch into the first question, and we may have more time later on to talk about some of those specific things about your company and certain takes on different things, but what does it mean for you to be intentional? John, I'm going to throw this to you first. I'm going to Stephanie, finish up with Richard. We'll go in that order to start off. So, John, what's it mean for you to be intentional?
Well, the word is interesting because I think back to several years ago when I was coaching a girls' soccer team, and we used the word intent all the time as to if you're going to pass the ball to a teammate, what's the intention there? And in terms of business, I'll go back to the very start of the business. When I kind of went to my note. I'm a hoarder. Okay, I admit it. And before digital hoarding, I was, I'd put away notes and paper stuff. And this is my original notes from right before I started the business. Now, one of the two things on here that I want to read, these are core values that I was trying to decide on. And the intention was twofold. One was to always hire people with high integrity and honest people. And that was, I kind of think back to, or my filter is, do I want to do anything in business, or do I want to have anyone working for me in business that I would be embarrassed to share with my children? Are we doing things that I'm proud of and that I can share with my children? And they would say, hey, that's good stuff, Dad. And the other intentional objective I had was everything that we do as a company is designed to help our clients, to help them to grow their business, whether it's a client like the seed companies that we work with, or the equipment companies or animal health companies we work with. How can we help them to grow their business? And their customers, that could be retailers, ag retailers, or farmers, how can we help, or veterinarians, how can we help them by the process and what we are offering them in terms of experience sharing, peer-to-peer dialogue?
Wow. I really, really appreciate the entire answer, John, and specifically the piece around who you're introducing to your children. You know, my kids watch who I'm interviewing on these podcasts. They watch the people that work for me, and at church right now, we're actually going through a piece on spiritual authority, or authority over your home. So who I let in and who I don't let in is important. So I love the intention there. Stephanie, let's go to you.
Yeah, I'm just going to pick up where John left off a little bit, because the values that we established early on. So I joined John about 3 years after he started the organization, and then was named CEO about 3 years after that. So there was an opportunity to really make sure that we were living and breathing the values, and they haven't changed in 28 years. So I think that's important. And I would bet that if you ask anyone from Beck Ag, they either know where those values are posted in their office, or they know what they are. And I've always been proud of that, because we continue to bring those up. And I know Richard has taken on that as well. But there's a couple of things when I think about intentional. I always pair a little bit with that word focus. And I think as a CEO, and as an organizational leader, I've always challenged those leading with me to make sure that we are intentional with what our people are doing. Do they have focus? Or are we allowing the distractions to come in? Now, I do believe it's our responsibility to evaluate distractions, make decisions quickly, and understand if there's going to be a return on time or a return on investment, but decide quickly if you're going to allow that distraction to interrupt where the focus is at. So I think that's part of being intentional as well.
Yeah, I love that addition. The addition of focus is an amazing filter to look at things through. Very good. Richard, what about you?
Well, I probably will parrot what you just heard in large part, but I joined in 19, and when I joined, I was able to join an organization that already had a really strong culture. So John and Stephanie both talked about the values of the company and how the employees were evaluated, hired, how they. You don't like to use the word family, but in large part, we're a big family. We work together daily. So I was able to join a company that had a really strong infrastructure, right, and competent, capable people. And then I would highlight what Stephanie just said. So for me, intentional is that we're focusing, every day we're focusing on driving future success for Beck Ag, which means that we're serving our clients' evolving business needs. Mark, at the beginning, we talked about the challenges of the industry, and they're really scaling at a pretty dynamic rate. So how do we help them get in front of that? And really, it's all pretty simple in some terms. It's focus on execution. Those that execute best win. And how do we enable execution for our customers? And then how do we internally look at delivering execution excellence ourselves? So in everything we do with our clients, that we're intentional on the processes we deploy and how we go about the process to make sure they get best in class services and that we deliver it on time and accurately.
Wonderful. Okay, I have to.
Mark, I'll interrupt you here a minute. You might have seen John and I both kind of smile a little bit when Richard said we're kind of a family. So like one of our company meetings early on, John gets up on the stage and says, "We are not family." And it's kind of one of those of us who have been around 28 years, kind of, you guys have got your own family. And you'll see on my LinkedIn feed, there's a big old post about, work is not family. And I think that's important to recognize a little bit, though. You want that culture of closeness, which a lot of families have, and they're blessed to have that. But we get to choose who we work with. We don't always get to choose our family. So I think that's really important. And I'm glad I got to choose a lot of people over the years to work with.
Yeah.
Look, I mean, on the other side of it, just because they're part of your family today, that means they might be tomorrow, right? So I don't mean to say it that way. I just say that we work really closely together,
exactly,
hand in glove to solve clients' needs.
Yes, absolutely. Well, and I agree with you on the analogy or the metaphor, I guess, if you will, of a family, Stephanie. In my experience, what I've found is that we often call ourselves a family within the culture of the company or within the day-to-day work. However, I've noticed, at least as the leader and the owner of my company, that when we've gone through some tough times and maybe had to lay a couple of people off and the paychecks stopped going, I found that my family stopped. So, I mean, it's interesting. It's also very hard to fire your family. And this is something I talk with my clients about this all the time. Like, I'm not sure that family's the right description, but I do want to come back to one piece that I think is consistent between family and work. And this is what John created in 1998, the core values. We just went through this exercise and we continue to revisit year over year within our family, what are our core values? And this is something that we want, as we implement this, we want our kids to be able to parrot back to you. These are what the core values of the Jewell family are. So, John, I want to come to Richard for this question, actually. So, Richard, you inherited a business that's almost, you've been in this role for a few years now, but now you're almost 3 decades into it, and you inherit a business that has some really strong core values in it. How did that impact your ability to take over as the CEO of the company in your term now, having those strong core values in place?
because and I would say if you interviewed any customer of Beck Ag, and this would go over the course of our history, almost 100% of the time we get really strong feedback on the quality of work. Well, our ability to deliver quality work to clients really is underpinned by the values of the company. You know, who we hire, what our expectations are, what are we trying to serve relative to our clients, and what are their needs that we're trying to solve for. And so I would say the values of the company, in large part, I just was able to inherit a machine that was running. And my job was don't throw any rocks in the cog, in the machine. We had to also think about that piece of the business that was that we were really excelling at when I joined. How do we extend our capabilities? So when you think about adding talent, adding people, it's important for them to understand the type of organization they're joining.
Mm-hmm.
You know, because most people are looking for the same thing. Can I trust the organization? Do the leadership have the right values? How am I going to be treated? You know, do I have an opportunity to grow? Can I spread my wings as well, right? Do I have individual responsibility as part of a broader solution? So all of those things were, currently residing, and I didn't have to add to that, right? Attention to detail, responsiveness to customers, disciplined processes, all of that already existed. So I didn't have to create or build that. I just had to be able to add on to it and leverage it.
One bit of important context to that is that when we started as a virtual company. I mean, we do have an office in Wayne, Nebraska, but we were a virtual company, and the level of professional that we have hired, for the most part, over 28 years, has come from people that these are seasoned pros, 20, 25 years of experience. They've worked for big companies. The three of us, prime examples, I was Chevron Valent, Stephanie was American Cyanamid, Richard started with Sandoz and some others, and eventually Syngenta. So
all over the board,
we all have that, big bureaucratic company experience and seasoning, and all ag focused. And the thing about that is that the motivational fit, which is very important for us in hiring, it's people that are like, hey, I've done years of doing what I've been told by the big corporate entity. I want out. I want to work with a company that's entrepreneurial, that allows me to live in my hometown and not have to go to an office to work necessarily. And what I bring to the table is many, many years of experience that I can, use to benefit Beck Ag. So that's kind of how, we started virtually, and I mean, selfishly, I started it virtually because I just didn't want to report to an office. And I thought, that was my personal reason. And then the upside of it is that in recruiting the absolute world-class best people, that's a big advantage. If you can say, but yeah, you don't have to move, you don't have to work in an office, you can just work out of your home, and you're kind of embedded with the marketplace, right? So we got people in Kansas City or Kansas and Iowa and Illinois and North Carolina, Georgia, all over the place.
Yeah, it certainly is an advantage to be able to pick up the right kind of talent as needed. And I think that's the world we've been living in for a while. Certainly the last several years have given light to this is what a lot more people want. And I respect any leader who decides what type of company they want to be, virtual or in person, and then just sticks with it. I've met a couple of other leaders this year who have said, hey, we're an office culture, but they've invested heavily. Randy Kennedy at Atticus is one. I don't know if you guys have been to his headquarters. It's incredible. He's invested in a really amazing building. He just said, this is where we work. And obviously his team, distributed, his field team distributed across the US, but his main office team is there about 50 some people right now. It's really kind of cool to see. So I'm great with both ways. I want to come back to this. One more question on this core values thing. So I asked Richard to talk about what's it like to inherit a company that has strong core values that have been embedded in the culture over, say, roughly a 20-year time frame, right? So John and Stephanie, certainly you guys had to defend those core values over that 2 decades that you guys were involved in building the company. As you're going through growth, as you're going through bringing on new people, you're distributed across geographies. How do you defend, or what did you have to go through to make sure that that stuck?
I don't think it was so much that we had to defend them. We just had to live by them. And I think that's where the misstep happens, is so much of the time leadership posts them on the wall, but their behaviors contradict the core values, right? And so John and I were the first in line who had to live by the core values. So example, one of our core values was to ensure that everyone had a balanced and productive life. Okay. Well, everyone's definition of balance is a little different. So sometimes we had to help people to understand that we all have different definitions of balance. But my gosh, that went to a long way of being able to open conversations to what is your definition of balance. And so being able to live them first and then hold others accountable to the values. We talked about them in performance. Look, a lot of decisions that we made, even as a board today, we sit around and say, does this align? So they're in conversations, and they're not in conversations if leadership doesn't bring them up. And then, it becomes really easy to have an organization circle around those core values.
Fantastic.
And also, I think it was important for the transitions between leadership that when I transitioned to Stephanie, she was the boss. She was running the show. I was in the background, and I mean, we talked on a regular basis all the time, but I was not the face of the company in front of the employee base. Stephanie did that. And I don't think we've ever not seen eye to eye. And I would say the same with Richard too. We're very much on the same page. But I wanted to read something quick. This is from, remember Scott Dunn, Stephanie? He was a moderator for our programs, and he was actually a professional comedian too. So several years ago at one of our company meetings, we had him come and do kind of a comedy skit. And here's some transcripts from that. He said, it's been a long time since I've been back to see the company. If it gives you any indication how long it's been, when I worked for Beck Ag, John Finegan actually contributed. The new people thought that he was an urban myth. That is sticking to the transition of leadership from one to another, that a lot of people had no interaction with me because Stephanie was running the show.
Yeah. I love it. I love it. There's a lot of wisdom in that, and I would like to whoever right now that's listening to this, whoever that is the leader or founder of one of these ag tech companies, one of these biological companies. There's so many of them right now. Any other type of startup, people should listen to that and heed that advice. I've run into a couple of situations where we're doing some large training implementations for teams this year where that original founder is still in the mix, and it's causing a lot of friction.
Yeah.
They're well-intended. I call this well-intended, poorly executed.
And it was important between my transition and Richard's too, that I made sure I was, and really I don't do anything unless Richard or one of Richard's direct reports, with Beck Ag calls, I stepped way away. So
yeah,
it is just so critical. It goes back to being intentional, right? If you want your people to follow, if you want leadership to be able to lead, you have to get out of their way sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
Mark, the only other thing I would add is, one of the core values is helping our clients and their customers succeed. We're in a relationship. It is a relationship business in a sense that, when you partner with clients, you're in it with them for them. Mm-hmm. And all of us like to see our clients succeed. And that's a much better working environment when people are able to leverage your skill set capabilities to grow their business. And it's a mutually beneficial relationship that's created by that. So I would say from a culture perspective and a value perspective, our team really enjoys that, right? They get good positive feedback. The client tells us how good what we did for them was, and that's in itself rewarding.
I would add to that and here's an area where both Stephanie and Richard are probably more hardcore than I am, which is a good thing actually. But I would tend to accept business from a client because we'd like to have that revenue. And those two have both at times in the past told me, we're not going to take that business because we don't think it's something we can really help them with. And I'm like, really? We don't want to take their money? And they're no, because we can't help them to grow their business. Not the way it is. And I really respect that. And that's kind of maybe embarrassing to admit that.
Well, and I think it's important to know which lane you're in, and having those systems, right, that are built into the culture, that are built that keep us guided, because it can become it's very easy to get distracted. I've done it. We've all done it. We've all found it's probably why we know not to do it, right? Because we found ourselves distracted and busy doing things that are not core, that are not aligned to the values or the services of the company and things like that. And so we'd love to, transition and give you guys a little bit of a platform to talk about that at Beck Ag at this point, and, share what some of those service areas that you are. And if you could, would love you to just frame it up a little bit around our question of what are some of those challenges that you see in the ag industry that leaders need to be a little bit more intentional about in the second half of the decade, and how are you guys working to provide those services?
I'll let Richard.
I would start out with the fact that we have evolved as a company over the 28 years that we've been in business. From when we first started, we've always been agriculture focused, and we've turned down plenty of opportunities outside of ag because that's not our focus. That's not our core. We're Aggies, all of us. When we started, for the first few years, we were pretty much focused on peer-to-peer experience exchanges, using advocacy and peer influence to help drive business or demand creation. And then Stephanie, over the next several years, added, we did instructional programs. We did a business academy that was more soft skills development for our clients, for the retailers. We did market research or customer intelligence work. So we kind of expanded out from just the peer influence programs to that. And then Richard, over the last 5 years, has really expanded those capabilities even further to incorporate more digital and data tools into the company.
Stephanie,
Richard, go ahead.
Yeah, sure, Mark. So I would say when I joined in 2019, we had a pretty strong foundation of capabilities that John just talked about. And as a leadership team and a board, we spent a year trying to think forward, right? Our crystal balls is as cloudy as everyone else, but we could kind of see the writing on the wall of some of the challenges that are coming in the agricultural industry. And when we say agricultural, we're talking, crop protection, seed, equipment, animal health principally is where we spend our time and energy. And some of those challenges have really escalated, right? So we would say things like we talked about earlier: labor, talent gaps, the diminished ability for organizations to hire the right people and staff is a broad concern. And you can pick any segment in the agriculture industry. That's true today. It will continue to be true. Changing customers' expectations, how they buy, how they use the internet to really understand product capabilities and fit and value propositions. Regulatory, if you're in the animal health and ag world, regulatory environment is an immense challenge, and the ability to bring blockbusters to market is diminishing and delayed, and the costs are going up. So there's a lot more parity and competition relative to the product set. To just name a few, right, of kind of the market overall driving market focus. So we took all of that and thought about how do we need to serve clients in the future? If we're going to help them navigate some of those challenges, what do we need to do? And so we really built a focus on execution excellence. Again, those who execute best win. Everybody has a strategy. The strategy might be good, but if you don't have the people, process, and tools that are connected in a way that are efficient to allow you to serve your end customer, you don't have much of a chance. And in a market that's increasing in competition, add on all the consolidation that's going to continue in all of those sectors. Bigger getting big, but the complexity of their businesses increased, accordingly. So we spent time intentionally trying to think about what are those products that we need to develop capabilities in to serve those evolving challenges. And so we, had the foundation of customer marketing engagement that John and Stephanie talked about. And we have built a world-class commercial productivity organization. So helping companies understand, in simple terms, it's connecting the right people in the right roles, executing the right activities at the right time, leveraging good sound data and technology and systems to drive customer intimacy. And so we have like I said, a world-class commercial productivity team that have done this all over the world and really know how to help customers build commercial productivity. And the other side of it is in the agricultural industry, everybody seems to struggle with data and fulfillment services, but we would say we focus really on pricing excellence. How do you connect a myriad of interdependencies to leverage and execute an end-to-end process, which nobody really does well today, which could be thinking about gross to net pricing, market price competitors, where do I need to be? How do I look at accruals? How do I leverage technology across data collection, data management, and then execute those payments to my customers, and then iterate on that. So I become really smarter with business analytics on things like share of wallet and customer churn to invest my team's time and attention appropriately. And the better job our clients do of using kind of that approach, they get smarter about their customers. Their customer satisfaction scores go up. Their loyalty and retention increases, and they're in a better position to win versus their peer group.
Yeah.
Well, I think, Mark, if I could just jump in there, a lot of what Richard talks about, and even what we've done over the past 25 years, has required leadership to step up and say, you know what, we're going to make a change. We're going to make a change that's intentional. We're going to make a change in how we go to market. We're going to make a change. And that change management, that ability to say we're going to do something different and know why, is where we've seen clients win in the past. Okay. And probably, when you think about what agricultural leaders need, what the industry leadership needs across the board, and especially as we come to more consolidation, as Richard talked about, from production all the way through the food value chain, we need leaders who'll step up and say, we're going to do it different. And when we get that kind of momentum going, then, when you look at the very, very big picture, when we're going to start to do things different, we can start to feed a lot more people.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that, Stephanie mentioned that I had pointed out that we're not a family, and sometimes it's more important what you are not and compared to what you are. And from the very beginning, I think Stephanie would echo this. I've said we are not an agency. We're not a marketing services company. We're not an ad agency. And the reason is back to my time with Chevron and Valent when I was in product management or brand management. We would have, the owner, the principal of the agency come in and make this big presentation about the 5-year retainer that we would sign with them. And then the next week after we signed on the dotted line, we would get a 24-year-old kid who really didn't know much about the industry, and that maybe they had an ag business background educationally, but that always really didn't sit well with me. So I was really, my intention was to create a company that was world class. You know, we like to think of ourselves and the people that we have more, and in terms of the, you know, the Deloitte's, McKinsey's, that level of professionalism versus the ad agencies.
Yeah, it's a great qualifier or clarifier. So I appreciate that, John. And Stephanie, I want to come back to you on something that you just said about different. As the industry goes through the consolidation, as we go through the changes that are coming in the next half of this decade, we're looking for leaders who step up to lead differently. Can you elaborate on that a little bit? I think that's when I agree with you in theory. I want people to understand what does different really look like?
Well, I think it's a little bit of a mindset, and I think we have to start with the end in mind, as one of our Beck Ag colleagues has preaches all the time. But with the end in mind, we're executing, and we're helping our clients execute with a degree of excellence that requires change. Some organizations feel they can do this well internally. Some people don't have the capabilities at all because of the age of their organization. But we can execute with that excellence. We can connect them with their customers, probably better in some cases than sometimes their own people can. But at the end of the day, we have to be able to have leaders in this industry execute with excellence so that we can move as fast as we can with the end in mind, and that's to feed, you know, a very hungry world, right? So that's a big picture end in mind. But if we're not delivering excellence at the production level, if we're not connecting customers, if we're not helping educate the channel, the retailers, the farmers, the livestock producers, informing and knowing who our customers are, how they like to buy, when they like to buy, all of those questions, and we're not willing to change how we go to market, there's probably a pause there somewhere. That you need to really look in the mirror and think about. I don't know, Richard, how would you describe it?
Yeah, the only color I would add to that is if you think about particularly the next 3 or 4 years, every dollar counts. I mean, I need to do more with less. And if I have to do more with less, I need to be incredibly efficient, or I'm going to have to let a bunch of my staff go, right? So driving efficiency in an organization, it's a little higher level conversation of feeding the world that Stephanie just talked about. But enabling, an organization to connect the dots more efficiently actually puts less pressure on the number of people that they have to have, and also eliminates the need to downsize because of poor performance.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. There's so many things that we can tie back to intentionality here. Mm-hmm. Right. And one of the big challenges that I'm faced with in the year that I've now, full year since I started studying the word intention, every single day I've looked at it, whether I've researched definitions, meditated on it, journaled on it, thought about it. One of the things that has truly been the biggest challenge in this study and in creating what's now this podcast and other resources around it is, as I look at what it means to be intentional, you guys have done such a great job of sharing how you guys have been intentional, creating core values, allowing that to resonate through your culture. How do you take that and now apply that to your process and determining how you serve the market, looking at what are the true challenges, not just creating something because you want to, but actually looking at what does the market need and then creating services that back that up. There's so much intentionality there. My journey in being intentional has now shown me all the ways that I'm not intentional. As I look at, defining, and it's not that I'm not intentional, but raising the standard for what intentionality looks like, right, has been a big challenge. It's shown me all the ways that I'm not. So with that in mind, I want to open up the floor for each of you to give some closing comments and thought with the end in Stephanie. coming in here in the last 7 or 8 minutes. As you close, I would love for you just to touch a little bit on what's required for leaders, in today's world to be more intentional. How important is it? What's required for them to be able to do it? And any closing thoughts or comments that each of you have?
One thing I would add that was a core value that we haven't mentioned at Beck Ag, and one of our core values is complacency is a disease, and we should always be raising the bar. And that's been really important. And I think that should be the intention of every leader, that you can't stay static. You have to keep growing. You have to keep improving. You have to keep raising the bar. And that, I would say that's the most important aspect or intentionality for a successful business, or for a business to succeed.
Mm. Fantastic. Could not agree more. And that's one thing I think people need to hear. And those of you listening to this, please send that line. If nothing else, share the podcast from that moment of John sharing on this idea of complacency is a disease. And so much of what keeps leaders stuck and it makes them become resentful of their teams, their company, their customers, their cultures, et cetera, is because often they actually got complacent and didn't do the work.
Mm-hmm.
Richard or Stephanie, your thoughts on our.
I'll let Richard wrap us up on this, but just my thoughts on leadership in 2000, and I believe it was 2008. I sent Finegan, and we all know what happened in 2008. I sent John an email, and I titled it "Choosing to Lead," and I do believe that leadership is a bit of a choice. Some of us, you could go the nurture, nature, all those things. But at the end of the day, you choose to lead. And then I think we also have the responsibility to mentor. Mark, you asked in preparation, who were the people that helped develop me as a leader? Dale Locken back in the day, David Parker. We all know those two individuals. I'll sit here with John Finegan, and I've learned also a ton of watching Richard Bettison. So these 4 men, unfortunately, in my life, I guess, or fortunately, fortunately, and I say this in a minute, really taught me a lot about leadership. But I choose to mentor. I sit around a table also with a lot of men because of my age. But we're bringing diversity in our industry of agriculture is going to be important, not just gender diversity, but diversity of ideas, diversity of thought, and allowing people to come in and think differently. That goes back to my, you got to be willing to change and lead change. Mm-hmm. But I do think it's a choice, and I challenge those who want to lead. And when you don't really want to, you got to pay attention to that too in your gut.
Wonderful.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say well said. I would only add that, the times in agriculture are going to be continually to be challenging, and leaders have a difficult task. We talked about complacency, pervasive pessimism, difficulty with achieving revenue targets, all the outside influences. There's a whole concept called organizational drag because of somewhat the complacency that aren't on that. How do you navigate those pieces? And so I think leaders in the future that are successful are going to have a really clear mission of what they're trying to accomplish. Who are we? What are we trying to accomplish? How do we serve the market? How do we find exciting ways and innovative ways to bring that to the organization so the team can rally around it? Because there are a lot of different places where you get kind of lost in the ditch, so to speak. So it is challenging going forward. But good leaders, I think, can navigate that and bring their organizations to aligned vision, mission that help them ultimately serve their customers better than their competition.
Yeah. Wow, you guys, this has been a brief masterclass in intentional leadership.
Mark, I'm going to summarize one thing, and I think it lends to the fact that there's 3 of us here. No one leads alone. Mm-hmm. And I think that's the one thing that your coaching business is relevant, but I had a coach when I was the CEO, but I never felt alone with the organization. John always had time to listen. I know Richard feels that he can pick up the phone and talk to John anytime. I'm available, but I think that's the other thing, especially leaders, the closer you get to the top of the organization, the more responsibility you take on as leadership. Just know that you cannot lead alone.
Mhm.
Very well said.
I think that's incredibly well said and really poignant, because I know on my journey as a leader, small business, there's not a lot of people around sometimes, and it feels like you don't have anybody to reach out to. I also know at least a lot of men that I get to talk with in some of our coaching groups that I lead. They need that space where they can go to plug in and know that they're not on an island, because there's an unfortunate number of leaders that feel like they are. So I'll say that if that's you, if that's the experience that you're going through and you're listening to that, here are some people that you can reach out to that are in amazing roles of influence that I'm sure would be willing to lend a hand, myself included. So with that, you guys, this has been fantastic, just fantastic information. I love the storyline. I love having all three of you on here and hearing the story of Beck Ag and where it came from, where it is today, how you guys are going to continue to serve. Richard, what, beckag.com? Is that how we go and learn more? Where should I point people?
Yep, beckag.com.
Right. And Kincannon and Reed. What's the website over there now, Stephanie?
krsearch.com.
krsearch.com. All right. Check into it. Thank you guys.
Also, people can find me on LinkedIn because I'm a big deal on LinkedIn.
Go connect with John on LinkedIn. That matter as well. So you guys, thank you so much for doing this. It's been fantastic.
Thank you, Mark.
Thank you, Mark.
All right, great. Thanks, Mark.